In this second slideshow on archaeological techniques, I'll cover the basic procedures for finding and investigating archaeological sites. There are 3 steps or stages to archaeological investigations. The first is to survey, to find sites. The second is to test the sites that you found to learn basic information about each site. And the third is to excavate those few sites that are of interest and have integrity to learn details. How do we find fossil localities or archaeological sites? Survey is a systematic examination of an area to find sites or fossil localities. You need to take environmental and past environmental, topographical, and geological conditions into consideration to be able to target likely areas. Because, of course, to find old sites, you must look in old dirt. Usually, you walk and look on the surface for artifacts or fossils. For artifacts, this works best if you are walking on a plowed field. For fossils, it works best if you're walking on an eroded bare dirt surface. But of course, you're not always in a plowed field or on a bare dirt surface. Plus, finding artifacts or fossils on the surface only tells you about near-surface sites. Here in South Carolina, archaeologists dig shovel test pits in regular grids, looking for artifacts and midden beneath the near surface. Shovel test pits are small, obviously dug with the shovel, and they're unable to go very deep, but they may go deep enough to show you buried artifacts or buried midden, indicating the presence of a site at that spot. The second stage in archaeological investigations is to test the sites that you have found. Generally, in testing, you want to examine the stratigraphy in just small areas or test units. Here you see 3 small test units on top of a mound in central South Carolina. The goals of testing a site include figuring out the time periods that are represented, the size of the site, the type of site, and of course you want to record the stratigraphy, finding out whether you have multiple time periods buried one underneath another. You also want to determine site integrity. Is any of the sites still intact? Potentially, you could have artifacts only on the surface and nothing underneath the surface. Is the site worth excavation? Here, for example, despite trenching to plant trees, much of the site is still intact. Part of testing a site may include remote sensing, which is a number of techniques used to examine what is underground before you dig into the ground. The examples of remote sensing that I'll talk about today include metal detecting, gradiometer, electrical resistivity, and ground penetrating radar. Most of you are probably already acquainted with metal detecting. With this, you have a small instrument that you use to detect metal. Then you must ground truth what you've found. You need to dig up that piece of metal and see what it is. The gradiometer is an instrument that you pull on wheels that measures the intensity of the magnetic field or magnetic anomalies underground. You end up with a map like this from your readings, which then needs interpretation, and it also needs ground truthing. That is, you need to dig into some of those things shown on the gradiometer map to figure out what they are. Here, we dug into the side of this rectangular shaped mound. The red circles are trenched through this edge, and we believe that this stepwise construction is what shows up as the wide line on the gradiometer. In soil resistivity, you stick metal probes in the ground and run an electric current between them. This technique can work only when you have certain conditions. So the soil must be moist enough that an electrical current could run between the dirt grains. It measures differences in electrical resistivity, that is, the ability of deposits to conduct an electrical current. As you might expect, walls, and high-packed roads have high resistivity. The current has difficulty getting through them. Whereas pits, where the dirt has been dug out and then replaced, resistivity is low. Here are resistivity readings of a 14th century fortress in Czechoslovakia. The brown have high resistivity, and the green have low resistivity. And here's the interpretation, showing walls and buildings in a moat. Ground-penetrating radar measures electromagnetic waves reflecting back as echoes from interfaces. So it's an excellent way to map layers in the ground. This also has an instrument that needs to be pulled across the surface of the ground. Here is a ground-penetrating radar map showing pit houses in the southwest, and here is what one of those houses looks like after excavation. The third step or stage in archaeological investigations is excavation. Excavation generally opens up a horizontal area of one time period. Here you see a 1500 Spanish house at the Berry site in North Carolina. This house had been burnt by the Indians. In excavation, you use the largest tool you can that will get you the results that you need. So here, for example, we're using a backhoe to dig a trench through the edge of the mound. Here, I'm using a small backhoe bulldozer. Shovel scraping is a lot more controlled. It allows a lot of dirt to be removed quickly, yet you can still keep track of the dirt colors that might tell you that you have a feature. When you finish a level, you cut the profile. That is, the extra dirt is cut away from the edges. The string at the surface marks the ideal shape of the unit. Troweling is slower than shovel scraping, but it leaves a level surface with cleanly cut dirt that shows the dirt colors or feature edges. Here is an area that's been shovel scraped and then troweled. You can clearly see an old 2 by 2 meter unit that had been dug 8 years previously. You can also see the undisturbed sheet midden in certain areas of this open excavation. Dirt colors, the outlines of features, and certain artifacts are mapped at the top of each excavation level. We also map the profiles. Sometimes, as in a backhoe trench like this, or in a hand-dug 50 centimeter wide trench like this. Or here, a 1 by 2 meter unit. In this unit, the excavators came down on a collapsed daub wall. Here's the profile through that collapsed wall. Most of the dirt from an archaeological site is dry screened, normally through 1/4 inch mesh. Everything found in the screen is saved and later washed and analyzed. However, screening or shoveling is not the way to recover very small, fragile artifacts. Instead, we use flotation. In this particular system, we have a screen meshed insert that has a mesh in the bottom that is half the size of window screens, so very tiny. You dump in your dirt, and very small, light artifacts, like plant remains, are gently floated out and into a piece of slippery polyester cloth. Heavier artifacts, like sherds and rocks, and even things like hickory nutshell, will sink and get caught in the very small mesh screen. Digging is hot, sweaty work. Digging is always full of surprises. Some are pleasant, some not so pleasant. Not so pleasant is when rainwater fills up your units. But there's a lot of fun to be had at sites. And, of course, people have to work together to throw shade over a unit so that you can photograph it. We had a surprise our first day at the site this year. The road had flooded. So archaeology is a nice profession if you don't mind getting dirty and you love being outside. So to review, archaeologists study material remains. Note, the phrase human remains specifically refers to skeletons, and we do sometimes also study skeletons. Paleoanthropologists study the remains of humans themselves. Artifacts are cultural remains, objects that have been made or used or altered by humans. Whereas fossils are rocks that are the remains of organisms, so organisms like bone that have been replaced by rock. Sites are places of human activity. Fossil localities are where fossils occur. To review, the 3 stages in archaeological excavation are 1, to survey, to find sites or fossil localities. The second stage is to test those sites that you found, to collect stratigraphic information, figure out the boundaries of the site, what kind of site is it, and to learn whether the site still has integrity, whether anything is left below the ground surface. And the third stage is to excavate some of those sites, to open up a horizontal view to learn more about a particular time period. Excavation involves many ethical issues. I'll talk about just a few of them. To dig or excavate a site is to destroy the matrix that holds the site. Therefore, archaeologists dig only what they must. We try to leave some of the site for future excavators who might have new questions and might also have new techniques that we've never even dreamed about using. We keep meticulous field notes. We take photographs. We draw maps. We keep records on curation quality paper. And we must curate our artifacts and notes in perpetuity